I discovered that I was taught not to care.
We got a specific sentence, maybe to summarize the drama of maintenance. That is to make everything go on as if nothing had happened, as if nothing had happened to whom?
No house, no building, nothing can last without some kind of maintenance. This is really closely connected to the theories of care, saying that we all need some people to take care of us at some point, someday.
Hello everyone, welcome to Love and Philosophy. This is Andrea, and here we explore philosophical, scientific, technological, and even poetic spaces beyond either or bounds. Today we're diving into a conversation about maintenance, which might not sound very exciting, but believe me it is, and also care and our relationship with the world, with materials, but also with all other sorts of relationships because it's all connected. But first I want to introduce this idea of STS, and also a person named Bruno Latour. Those of you who already know everything about science and technology studies, you can skip ahead a little bit, but for those who don't, it's an interdisciplinary field, and it examines how science and technology are tangled up with all these social, political, economic ideas that scientific facts, for example, or objective truths are not in isolation from all these relations. It actually explores a lot of themes that we've talked about through something like participatory sense-making, for example, but it's doing it more from a sort of tech side and how it connects to this relationality and how we might think of it a little bit differently. And one influential figure there is a person named Bruno Latour. He actually passed away a couple years ago, maybe 3 years ago, and he was a French philosopher, an anthropologist, a sociologist, kind of hard to characterize, but he wrote this groundbreaking book way back called Laboratory Life in the 70s, I think it was, even maybe the end of the 70s. And then he wrote another book called Science in Action, and then he wrote books like We've Never Been More Modern or We've Never Been Modern, not sure exactly, one of those titles. And this was part of how STS became a discipline because it was rethinking labs and science and what it all means and even what objects mean. And there's a whole actor network theory which he proposed, which a lot of you might have heard of or come into contact with, and it's sort of tracing how the associations between people and things create these patterns which are stable and which end up being what we think of as like something like society, for example. So in this conversation you'll hear us talk a little bit about this missing masses idea, and that comes from a famous essay by Latour called Where Are the Missing Masses? And in that article or essay, he argued that when sociologists try to understand social bonds or all these relations, they're sort of coming up short because something's missing. And what is it that's missing? The objects. So these material artifacts that surround us and that are, always part of us, from seatbelts to the doors that we close to the desks that we sit at to all the tools that we use, which gets into sort of technology. These are all kind of like agents that are shaping us or that we're shaping, that are co-shaping our behavior, and a lot of our responsibilities and the way that we're held together become tied to these objects or to these relations of artifacts might be a better way to say it. So this might remind you of something like extended mind, for example, where we really start to think of the objects as extensions of or part of or participants in all these other things that we're creating. And this is just more connected to the social fabric. But as you'll hear today's two guests discuss, instead of really thinking about objects in the way that they're presenting here, as you'll hear, the sense of maintenance, let's just say, is what's different. And we're going to get into that here, but not just thinking about the objects, but actually objects aren't even what we think they are. And the two authors of this book, which is called The Care of Things, which I read and I highly recommend, is Jérome Denis and David Pondelia. Those are the two guests today. And Jérome is going to introduce David, and David is going to introduce Jérome. So I will let you wait for that. But both of them are really accomplished scholars in different ways, and they've been working at very important research centers and universities in France and thinking about these ideas. They're founding members of various journals and groups of people who are really influential in teaching kind of engineers and people in technical systems and thinking about what a technical system is. So they collaborated on this book, but they've actually been working together for a long time. I think they say well over a decade. So they also have a relationship, which is itself important here. And they were actually working on a small sociology of signage, which they did together. I think that's the English version in 2010. And that was about the Paris metro system. And their partnership was this sort of collaborative ethnographic research. And it was in that research that they came upon this idea of maintenance and what this really means and rethinking the care of things. So this book that they wrote, which was published in French in 2022 and in English just last year, is a meditation on what it means to make things. And I'm publishing this around Thanksgiving in the United States, and because I was thinking about, this kind of gratitude that's part of reimagining how things are maintained every day by us, by those around us, by various people and workers, and how a lot of the work that's really important, whether it's in the education system or actually with the objects all around us, is a kind of maintenance. And this book is really beautiful because it kind of flips our attention and reminds us of that ongoing care, actually, that's happening all the time. And there's something really helpful about that right now. Wonderfully, they came to this because as they were studying the signage system of the Paris Metro, which is very beautiful if you've ever seen it, and they were actually looking at the writing of it, but they were thinking about the power of writing and its capacity to organize the ways we live together. And as they were doing that, someone just sort of at the end of their research said, well, have you talked to the maintenance workers yet? And they were kind of shocked because they hadn't even thought about that. And so they went to talk to the maintenance workers of all these signs, and that completely changed everything they thought they knew about the signs. In the book, they write that, they knew the signs in every detail by then, but then when they were talking to the maintenance workers, the people who cared for them daily, to see them through their eyes, everything changed. It was completely different. And I don't know if you've ever really worked closely behind the scenes, maybe even at a restaurant or something, but you do notice that when you're doing these daily work to maintain what other people take not kind of for granted or they don't really notice, you see everything differently. And there's something really interesting about that. And it relates to this idea of the missing mass that I brought up about Latour, this ongoing thing that's so obvious and everyday that we don't see it anymore. Two people I should mention. One is Eucalis, which is an artist, which we talk about a lot. I'll come back to her in just a minute. But the other is John Oliver from Last Week Tonight. Check out the link in the show notes to a little clip from Last Week Tonight called Infrastructure, which we mention in this episode because it's this kind of parody of some of the things we talk about, how, whatever, it's not sexy to think about maintenance, but actually maybe it is. Some of the key themes that we talk about here are fragility in that way. And rather than celebrating just robustness and autonomy and all these things, there's something actually about fragility and ongoing maintenance and relationships and care that is actually really strong and not at all what we might think of when we hear the word fragility, for example. It's actually this wonderful paradox or this beyond kind of either or idea of the fragility of life and the care for it being actually what is maybe our strongest embodiment and our strongest reason for even being here and wanting to be here. And then, of course, we also talk about attention a lot because that has a lot to do with this. And this meta-attentional engagement is a big influence for them. The idea that nothing happens, but then everything is happening in that nothing, so to speak. It's sort of the key element, and noticing it makes all the difference. And then maintenance versus repair is a big theme that you'll hear us talk about. So something breaks, on a big scale, and we have this big emergency, and then people come and repair it. And those people usually end up being heroes or something when things have to be repaired. In a sort of contrast, but actually not even only in a contrast, but a deepening. Actually, there's this ongoing maintenance, which is like the daily pulsation, I think they call it. This rhythm, this pulsation of attention and ongoing care that sort of prevents breakdowns most of the time. So it's odd that we have the breakdown, or at least when things are running in a certain way, which we hope will continue. We also talk about this invisibility and this missing quality, which I think a lot of us feel in different ways right now. And maybe this is an interesting way to put a finger on what is that feeling of this missing, something missing or invisibleness that we need to see clearly again. Also just a celebration, or they talk about thinking with maintenance workers and people that are doing this and how it actually transforms the way you're in the world. And Eucalis, the person I mentioned, is she's basically an American artist who wrote this whole manifesto for maintenance art. And I really would suggest you look at her work, Eukeles, Eucalis. And she has this whole wonderful manifesto coming on the side of maintenance, so to speak. She says something like, I'm an artist, I'm a woman, I'm a wife, I'm a mother. I do a hell of a lot of washing, cleaning, cooking, supporting. And those are just sort of everyday things, but I want to exhibit them as my art because they are art. And not only her, she talks about, other people who are doing these so-called everyday things, but actually those things are holding life together and they're very artistic if you just put your attention on them in a certain way. Her masterwork is this thing called touch sanitation, and that was from, I think it was around the same time Bruno Latour was writing his first book, like end of 70s or early 80s. And she goes around and shakes hands with every maintenance worker or every sanitation worker in New York City and telling them thank you and like just putting her attention on them and seeing them because they literally hold that city together. I just mentioned her work because we talk about it here, but we don't ever explain it. And it is a kind of thread in their book. Also, this sensibility. A lot of the conversations I've been having lately, I think most of them I haven't published yet, but you'll be hearing them coming because I have these conversations months before they air. And some of them, I have the conversations and they never actually go public. But a lot of them are talking about touch. Instead of thinking about sight and vision and eyes all the time, a lot of people seem to be turning towards this idea of touch and the senses in a deeper way, and this sensibleness and sensitivity and tact and tactile. So you hear those words a lot, or at least they come up a lot in the book, and I'm pretty sure in our conversation too. The way things feel and touching them, repairing them, sewing, washing the dishes, taking care of each other, holding each other as a kind of, care that's also like, just daily sort of the way we touch each other. All of that is part of these ideas here. We're going to engage with that on different levels in this conversation, and it goes even deeper in the book. There's a lot of beautiful examples. What I hope you get out of it is just thinking about, when we think about this moment now that we're in, wherever we are, and about our future, then maybe it's not about being autonomous individuals only, but also this power that humans are so good at caring for each other. We have this wonderful superpower of care and of allowing our fragility to bring us into much more strength and innovation, and that takes patience and humility and of course love, and that those are actually powerful things. Those are powerful things. Humility, attention, patience, love. These are actually superpowers. I really believe that. So, on that note, let's go on into this conversation. I hope you enjoy it, and happy Thanksgiving. I'm really thankful for you. I'm thankful for whatever you do today that gives anything of love, humility, patience, or care on any level. Just know that it's important. Even if nobody seems to see it, it matters. All right, here we go. Welcome to Love and Philosophy. Thank you so much for being here. I was going to let you both introduce one another or introduce yourself as you see fit today.
Yeah, one another is a good idea. So here is David Ponty, who is a researcher at the French National Research Center and also a member of the Center for Sociology of Innovation from an engineer school, École des Mines, mining school in Paris.
And this is Jérome Denis, who is actually the director of the CSI in Paris, in Paris School of Mine.
I was actually there not too long ago, so I actually have a good visualization of your university. I was walking and going into the museum with all the beautiful rocks, and
nice.
I loved it. I love seeing all those rocks. Wow, it was really spectacular. Just so you know, so I'm actually envisioning you.
Okay, yeah. You have an idea of the kind of book.
Exactly. So we're going to talk about this book, which I want to show the cover because I just love the cover. I mean, I'm sure there's different covers, but The Care of Things, Ethics and Politics of Maintenance. So how did you come to this subject? How did you come to one another? And how did you come to this subject? You can start anywhere with that, but I'm very interested in it.
So one another, it's a very long story. It began in the end of the 1990s, actually. We were doing our PhD, not together, but we were on the same team. So we were quite young. It's more than 25 years ago. And maybe David can explain. He was working on scientific signature, co-authorships and stuff like that. And so progressively we decided we will do that, sign and do research together. And that's one of the outcome of this decision made in, I don't know, maybe 89, 90, 98, 99, maybe, probably.
That actually fits very well with the care and slowness and over time. So, but did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, we cannot dive into all the decision we did all along this journey, but at some point, very early, because of the topic of our respective PhD, so I was working on scientific authorship and Jérome on other thing related to writing in organization and work settings, and at some point, the writing came up as really a topic to investigate, and we did different research separately, but always talked about what we did separately, and at some point we came with a collaborative investigation in the early, it was in 2005 or 6, and then we really go into this urban science in Paris inquiry, and we were really into the design and the production of those signs and how they organize, shape all the subway settings, all the corridor, all and everything. So as writing as a powerful means to organize and discipline people into this area. And at some point in this investigation, maintenance really appraised. It was not part of the topic, it was not a decision to investigate, study maintenance, but it really come up from the field almost at the end of our inquiry, because we were in this meeting with one of our, let's say, the main format, the main informant. We were discussing all we did and if something is missing, and we were almost saying goodbye, and she, this kind of flash, and say, oh, did you went to the maintenance department and follow the maintenance guy? And we were, no. So it was a new start for the investigation. And at the same time, Graham Thrift published a paper in 2007. The title is Out of Order. And so we realized how far these 2 years investigation, one to design and the other one to maintenance about these subway signs, was not only a monograph, but it really relates to broader concern in academia, and not only in academia, but to different people, organization, practitioners. And so the decision come here after the maintenance present herself have something interesting. We decide to dive into it, and so we organize different panels in conferences to meet with different people we didn't know before that, and discover different topics and objects, and the way these scholars deal with the way they are maintained. So at some point we became part of what we call, to brand it, maintenance and repair studies.
I think it's becoming actually a real world. It looks like, I mean, the more I look, the more I found, which is always a good sign. But I like that you came across this in a way that was a surprise as I was reading the book, which of course is about maintenance of things, and we'll get into that. I did find myself thinking a lot about writing and about research and about the other topics that I imagine had led you into it. There's definitely a lot of resonance there, which maybe we can come back to, or you can say something about any time. But just you were looking at the signage or the writing of the metro signs in Paris, which are very special. Yeah. And then that was a big project, and it was sort of at the end that someone said, have you talked to the guys that are doing the maintenance? And you were like, no. And you went to do that. And then in the book, you say it changed everything in a way. Like everything, I'm not sure exactly how you say it, but somehow everything that you had thought was different after you talked to the maintenance people.
This is very important because this is maybe a specificity of this book. We are not philosophers, we are sociologists or STS scholars. But there is this idea that we needed maintenance to do philosophy in a way, or to understand their own philosophical problems, let's say it like that. So maybe to put it in a nutshell, at the end, at the phase end of our investigation, we consider that the power of science, their ability to organize the world of wayfinding systems, and especially the Paris one, was I don't know. The source of this power was immutability and omnipresence, or the fact that the boards were standardized, the signs were standardized, heavily standardized, and they were made in a specific material, a very sturdy material. That was how a lot of people told us. So we were like very first Bruno Latourian. We were Latourian in a way, saying that okay, it's immobile, immutables, and this is how they are so important. The first rounds we did with the maintainers, so we separate each other, and one went with two guys and the other with two other guys for the whole day for the first our first investigation in the maintenance department, and everything we imagined and we knew about science seems to be, not exactly like it is in the real in reality, or in the corridors, or in the station, on the platforms and stuff like that. All the places, because there seems to be these signs seem to be fragile. They change. They were not all up to date. They weren't here. There were things that were absolutely not in our picture in the first part of our investigation. And what changed at first is that we thought that we were wrong, that we were completely, it was a misinterpretation at first. And so we said we have to put everything we knew and we thought about science in the bin and just to completely start over our investigation. But thinking about it and reading about maintenance and really, especially reading about care, we will go about that further, I imagine. But reading the work of Anne Marimol and the idea of versions, and progressively we understood that it was not that one version was the right one and the first one was the wrong one. It was that the idea of immutable, immobile were performed by the fragile signs that were taken care of by the maintainers. So the idea that maintenance generates the solid, completely standardized version of the signs. So we reconcile the two sides of our investigation eventually, but it changed everything, because especially we were completely in depth with the first Bruno Latour and Madeleine Acriche sociology with objects and artifacts, and the idea that matter is important, matters in social relationships, and generally when you say that in social sciences, you think as matter as something that resists, and people doing this to say that matter is important in social sciences and in social relationships. And so we progressively understood that the point is obviously matter matters, but also in terms of fragility and of people taking care of matter and of objects and of artifacts, which is not exactly very present in the first actor network theory studies, even if in the first Madeleine Acriche papers, repairers, maintainers are present. They are not completely erased. In Bruno Latour works, it's less. It's really they are less visible. And actually, Suzanne Lista wrote a very important paper in which she wrote that there is no reasons to put aside maintenance. So she didn't really dive into it, but she insisted about that, discussing Bruno Latour and the sociology of door closer, a famous Bruno Latour paper.
Maybe just to add two few things that change is the way, because at that time we were not in the Center for Sociology of Innovation. The thing is that being Latourian, Acrichian, we were, let's say, into innovation and following different kind of innovation and in writing practices. And so the thing that changes to step aside a bit from innovation and understand how maintenance is related to it or not. The other thing that changes is the way that we make room for maintenance. And making room for maintenance is to investigate some part of the world that are no more designer and users. just to be quick.
To try to make it a little bit general, one thing that comes to mind for me when I was reading this and when I hear this is there's a similar pattern, I think, that I've experienced in different areas of life, and one that I think is very general that maybe everyone would understand if I express it is when I started studying neuroscience or science, I had this idea of it, which is, I think, comparable to the way you might have thought of those signs. It's a solid object. I think it fits with the Latourian concept. It's solid, or in a sense. And then the closer I got to it, what I would say becoming part of the maintenance in a way, the more I couldn't really believe in that. And it became much more complicated. And yeah, there was a kind of a rupture, which was leading to a lot of further insights, but also you have to recognize this fragility that I had been putting a lot on it not being fragile in a way. I don't know if that makes much sense to either of you or if that opens anything for you, but I just want to put it there for people who don't, maybe have never read Bruno Latour, or how this opened out of a clear either or sort of situation into, in the book you talk a lot about fragility and multisensory and multi-dimensions. It just becomes intra-related. And that moment seems like an important one.
Yes. So the first thing is there is important connections with science studies and the first laboratory studies, which mean that people really observing how science is made, is concretely made, is a very good way to grasp and to understand this fragility and this processual making of for instance, or Michael Lynch did at the end of the 70s and the beginning of the 80s. So one of their main gesture was to acknowledge this fragility, this heterogeneity of the science practices. But then the science and technology studies went with technology, which is the T of STS, and the discussion somehow was displaced around mainly innovation, as David said, and more large settings of discussing not the fragility of innovation. It's a bit like that, but the heterogeneity of the trajectories of any innovation. To criticize the idea of you have research and development, and then market studies, and then users who adopt or not the technology. So the technology studies in science and technology studies did that mainly. And when they insisted on a role of objects and artifacts, it's like in material culture studies and in the first Latourian text about sociology with objects and with artifacts, they almost forgot the fragility part of it in a way, to insist that we live and humans live among artifacts which participate in the organization of the society. And this is what Bruno Latour called the missing masses. And he used to criticize sociologists, saying that, okay, you are speaking about social relations, but only with humans, and this is completely stupid, because humans couldn't do society if they didn't have any objects, if they were naked. And this is why we are not exactly like monkeys. So that's the first aspect of it, and this is why fragility and heterogeneity and processes are important in science and technology studies, but intriguingly, not as much when it comes to discuss the importance of artifacts or objects. So that's the first point. So what you say about the fragility and the material heterogeneity is really important, because this is the first thing that struck us when we followed the maintainers in Paris subway metro, in Paris metro or subway, is that they were dealing with the science in a very special way, that is as something that is some things that were constantly transforming, that were constantly changing. And actually, of course, signboards for them were very important, but it was not only signboards. It was rust, it was the wall and the materials with which the wall is made, and the materials of the signs itself, and how everything interacts. And so it's not only fragility. I think fragility was the first thing that really struck us. Say, oh, they are not as solid as we thought. But then we discovered that what was very important for maintenance is this material transformation. And this is very important to us because they taught us in a way, and they taught us they helped us to understand what Deleuze, for instance, or Deleuze and Guattari said about the craftsmen, and the idea that these are the kind of people who are able to plug themselves into the flux of matter, which is something, or materials, so the flux of materials. When you read this is quite abstract. You can understand, but it's quite abstract. And when you follow maintainers, it's very concrete. It's exactly what they are doing, and it's exactly their problems. They want to understand how matter react, how materials interact between each other, and this is really crucial to get these lessons from maintainers and to understand how they deal very, very simply with very huge problematic issues and philosophical issues. And I remember during our first presentations and our first communications, we met with Karen Barad in a conference, and we did one of our first presentation about the signs that were fragile, that were broken, and saying that they are not as immobile and immutable. And she was very nice, but she disappeared after that, so we never met again. But she went after our presentation. She said, "Okay, you are exactly explaining very simply what I try to explain to people, and they don't understand. But this is not us. This is maintainers." And I think it's very important because it's the way maintainers live in the world and the way they are experiencing material world that can help us thinking very crucial and important issues or matters, philosophical issues, philosophical matters, and even, of course, political ones.
That's great. That's exactly what I was hoping to kind of start to unpack. Is it seems like this is what a lot of that literature was calling attention to, but not about objects, which is very weird in a way. It's almost like we're doing an excavation. We could only handle so much, and now we're like looking a little deeper somehow. It seems a continuance of, even as it has to kind of criticize a bit, which is interesting and actually part of, the rhythm of the book in a way. So did you have anything you wanted to add there, David, before I go on, or?
I don't know, depending, because you mentioned multisensory or everything, and to follow up on what Jérome just said, I can add few on that, because to consider things or objects not as much as table and with very clear boundaries, but as flows, actually involve those kind of people to engage bodily with those things made of flows and processes. And we discover, and they really we learn from them how, of course, this is about noticing, and so the eyes and the vision, clear. There's so much about that. Maybe I can skip a bit because it's obvious. They see the world, they see the thing, they see. Jérome already get into a bit of it, but vision is always articulate with other senses, and depending on situation, depending on the kind of things they are dealing with. It can be smelling, it can be hearing, it can be touching. Touching is really also another one, but one more time, is depending on the settings, the kind of maintenance work that is involved. And so the point is that depending on configuration, we can make a kind of a hierarchy between the different bodily engagement and senses that are involved. But the point is not to have this kind of cartography, I don't know. The point is that this is always multisensory. And this is always something that involves different kind of part of the body that is clearly related to rules and objective, because those people come with, they are mandatory to the situation. They don't come when we are in professional and organizational setting, of course. They don't come just to see or to smell, or no, this is mandatory, and in advance they must know or imagine or anticipate what they're gonna see, smell, and do. But what is very important in this multisensory aspect is that it's on one part to confirm and to go into what the rules and the framework actually already organize and frame, but by multisensory involvement they are also open to surprises. What what the rules already anticipate, what come up, and this is part of very of their expertise on this part.
Yeah, it's a bit cartoonish of me to say this, but in reading the book, you can kind of imagine that you go back into the body when you start to talk to the maintenance people again. I'm exaggerating, but it's almost like it's all in the head, and it's this kind of thought experiment in a way, and then it becomes really bodily and the senses, and it's interesting the movement that comes there in the book, and you can correct me or whatever if this doesn't make sense to you, but to me it's hard to talk about, which is why I want to try to talk about it. But it becomes more mundane in the sense everyday kind of way, in the same way I was talking about science. It's this thing that seems wonderful and perfect. It's this object that's there, and then it becomes a process that's sensory and embodied, and it becomes so rich, and at the same time nothing happens in a way, because it becomes so consistent and all the time. What does that bring up? I know that's a lot, but it's messy. I'm just trying to see how we can get into this, because it's not a very clean cut. It's fractal.
No, but it's very important, and it's and I think it's really it's crucial of the question of the maintenance, and maybe, but we can address this question maybe later. But it's maybe the differences between focusing on repair and focusing on maintenance, because there is this idea that there is a very concrete bodily commitment, and the senses are really important. A first aspect is that it's also the case in settings where maintenance operation interventions are equipped with tools, because of course you have a lot of maintenance interventions that are equipped with things to look throughout something, for instance, or with sensors and stuff like that. So, but you cannot do without bodies, and this is super important. And actually, even the high-tech tools that are used nowadays are in tension with the importance of the body and the senses, and you have really interesting situations now where in which maintainers resist to high-tech tools or instruments to keep their expertise and their bodily expertise and their sensory expertise. So this is important. That's the first aspect. But then it's again and again, and this is what Mirlo Laderman-Jokeles, the artist, the conceptual artist we discuss with all along the book, and she was on the cover of the French version of the book, one of her performance, say it's something that you do every day and you have to do again, and a lot of people actually participate in doing, and so it's unnoticed, even if it's not completely invisible. It's mainly unnoticed. So it's it's something that is it's absolutely not in the foreground of our experience, of most of people's experience. So the idea that it's a background activity, a repetitive one, and sometimes really not as fun as that to do, is super important to us, because it's still an expertise, and it's still something that not everyone can do, and it's not as easy. And this was also important to us, because when we got into the subway stations with the maintainers, we discovered, for instance, how they are able to pay attention to things that we didn't notice at first at all. So we weren't able even to look at things correctly. And of course, we were not able to touch things and to understand what was happening here and what should be done, of course. But still, they do that every day. Their pay grade is not great, and it's kind of a dirty job, dirty work, something that is made by people, mostly racialized people, men, mostly in urban settings, women at home. And this is part of all this question of invisible work in general. So, and somehow, and we are really connected to UKLS work and all our performances. Our idea was, how can we make this expertise, but very mundane expertise, matter? How can we take maintenance into account? And in a very large sense, because into account in our stories, in the way, for instance, we explain the relationships between humans and technologies, for instance, but also take maintenance into account in accounting practices and in prices and in salaries and in all these important aspects, which is not detailed in the book, but is part of what we do and how we also talk to people and other kind of research we did. How can we have a fair price, for instance, for maintenance? Because of course these activities are mainly the ones that are considered as costless or not, they are undervalued in most of situations. Not all of them, but in most situations they are undervalued. So the idea of bringing to light this expertise and this bodily expertise, which is still mundane, is super important to us.
One phrase that's coming to mind is the one about normalcy. They're taking care of normalcy. And I was even thinking about how much of the most important jobs, from teachers to maintenance workers, are doing that, because it's so consistent and so important, overlooked, which is part of that weird paradox too that comes. But you raised this point about, well, there's a couple things hanging in the air, like ukulele, because that's so rich and it's weaving through the book. But the idea of like innovation and development, and also the idea of there being a difference between repair and maintenance. Well, first, David, if you want to say anything about the other, did you have any comment?
Yeah, we got a specific sentence, and maybe to summarize the drama of maintenance, that is to make everything go on as if nothing had happened.
Right.
And actually, as soon as you followed maintenance, actually a lot of things happen. So as if nothing had happened, to whom? And clearly this is one of the clear distinction we try to underline between maintenance and repair. And so to follow up what Jérome just said about ukuleles, maintenance. She really into maintenance and the mundane, repetitive, boring activities. And at some point, repair, what the distinction I'm gonna dive into is not on the reality, is more on the approach, and more on what you put forward and backward. So this is the two words does not refer to different realities. They refer to the same, but depending on if you switch at the forefront maintenance or repair, you got a very different picture of what you are describing. So maintenance, this is really repetitive, boring, and actually most of people are involved at some point in it, doing the washes, knitting different clothes, so it's very different situation, and made on a very regular, mundane, and let's say boring rhythm, and a continuous one. Repair is in this contrasting attempt is more a clear-cut activity that come after something broke, after a kind of event, and this is another event that responds to the first one. You got repairer that come in front of the scene in action films. You got all those kind of very famous actors, of course, men with muscles and everything that save the world. So I just underline too much, but just to explain the thing you got one event, and repair is another kind of event that repair, so that bring back to the thing, the situation, the institution to order, to normalcy, as you just mentioned. And so this is really something that is binary, contrary to maintenance, that is a continuity, and you get this kind of different kind of actors with, let's say, heroes or people that save the world or the situation. And in maintenance, it's unnoticed and ongoing activities made by regular people. Just to contrast too much, but to make it.
No, it's great. There's these layers, and I think it relates a lot to time and to attention, to noticing all of these things that you're layering in that we're trying to talk about. So there's this way in which things go on, and we focus on development or innovation, maybe because it's so everyday and so overwhelming to be aware of all the time. There's a lot of reasons, maybe. But then there's a rupture and something happens, like we have an emergency and something has to be repaired, and then everyone focuses on it. And those people doing the repairing sort of become the focus. And that's often maybe confused with what we've been talking about here. And I think when it comes to the noticing and to the time and to the care, this matters a lot. And also to what Jérome was saying about this isn't just like this is in all kinds of areas of society. In a way, we're talking about approach to the way that we are living too, and what we prioritize as, people living in different places at different times. So I just want to bring all that up, all those layers. And I think maybe we could, you can say whatever you want to say, both of you, but then maybe we can talk about an example or more than one example. The yesterday tonight, what is the news?
We have several stories. Maybe we can start with one of our hero, quote unquote, is John Oliver, because we use a lot of performances from UKLS, but we also use one particular episode of Last Week Tonight, a late show from John Oliver, who we love really because he's super interesting and his team is really a great team between thorough investigation and sketches and jokes. And so he has, in 2015, he did this episode about infrastructure, and actually it turned out to be an episode about maintenance. And he said it's very hard to understand how much maintenance is invisible or unnoticed and how much is important. And he said, if you want to understand that, you can just imagine a movie about great catastrophes and great breakages, and where you have these very famous actors who are playing the role of the savior. And so he tried to and you can find it on YouTube. He filmed a trailer for a movie who can be about maintenance, and it's very funny because very concretely what it means, for instance, to maintain a bridge. And he says, and you look at people, just adjusting, I don't know the term in English, screw, let's say a screw, for instance, or watching for leaks and saying, is it a big leak, is it not big leak? And so he used very famous actor to do that, and music that is very suspenseful music and stuff like that to make it understand. So that's, for instance, and in front of that, he said that, of course, if the bridge would explode and people bringing pieces all together to manage to have some kind of bridge, so the car could I don't know, escape something, or it would be a much more valuable movie than the movie about maintenance. And you have a lot of that for cars, for instance. You can, let's say for cars, for instance. And we worked with Cornelia Hummel, who owned a Mustang herself, and also who did a really nice book about Mustang, classic Mustang owners. And for instance,
in France, right? Classic Mustang owners.
Yes.
In Europe or in France?
In Europe, yeah, in Europe.
She's just for the American viewers, because
yes, this is important.
It's a special thing, a different thing.
Yes, this is a very strange thing, because in Europe, classic Mustang are really they're not really costly because they are not cars for museum at all, but they are cherished because I think they represent something like America.
Yeah,
For
the
Europe.
Mustang.
So Mustang, that's important. And so a lot of people have one. They are not rich people. They have to wait a lot to have a classic Mustang. And of course, you could insist on the I don't know, accidents and breakage and use that. But what she was interested in and what we worked on with her was the daily maintenance of this classic Mustang. And what is really interesting is that people are afraid, they are worried about the continuity of their car and of their car's authenticity. Will it really remain a classic Mustang? If I have to change this or that because of norms and standards, or of just because some equipment is not available anymore, for instance, or you have to put different kind of things. You have to change the brakes, for instance, because it's more secure to have brakes. And what is really interesting is, first, we are talking about multisensory expertise. The owners of these cars feel with their body everything that could go wrong with their car when they are driving it. And it's really, it's even touching in a way, because you understand in the description she gave about these people and in their interviews that they really are plugged into with their feet, with their back, with their ears, of course, but with their hand, to the vibrations of the car, for instance, for the sounds of the car. And they know the sounds that are okay, for instance, but they are also able to pick the sounds that are quite strange and to be very careful of the next occurrence of this sound. And if it's too much, you have to go for service the car and just to verify if everything is okay. So, for instance, these car owners are experts of their cars, a lot more, I think, than most of people with their regular cars. Of course, sometimes listen very intriguing sound, for instance, but not as they can do it. But what is important also is that they are worried about it. They really are. So this is a disquieting attention. It's something that they are obsessed with, and they can become obsessed with. And
Definitely
then,
gets to the care thing. Having been around a lot of people and a lot of different cars, I think what you're talking about there is sometimes people collect cars, and it's a very different kind of thing than this way of being in relationship with the car and this continuity, which I think relates a lot to what you were both saying about the maintenance workers earlier too, just to kind of make that connection. It's a more bodily, everyday relationship. It's just to put that in.
yes, and they are listening to the car. So in a way, they also are. They pay attention to what the car has to say, in a way, or has to show in terms of fragility, for instance. And this is a real relationship. And when they need to intervene on the car, which is the other side of the things, which is almost every month with these cars, they try not to intervene too much. And they discuss with the whole community of classic Mustang owners to check if it's still a classic Mustang if they do this or that, or change this or that, which is very interesting. And one important aspect of it is this kind of cars to really be a classic Mustang, they have to drive it. It cannot be collected and remain at ease somewhere completely immobile.
It reminds me too, I mean, in the book you also talk about Mona Lisa, and there's something similar going on there, but just at a different level that nobody ever sees in terms of keeping it the Mona Lisa, but it's always changing too. But this is a more personal, everyday, level. But did you have something, David, that was coming?
I don't know if you agree or if you want to touch on this, but this continuous relationship also shed light on the ambiguities and the, let's say, dark side of maintenance, because those car owner worried, but at some point the relationship is too much for them and they sell the car. So that really put the attention on the way maintenance is not that beautiful or something very positive or whatever. And so, to be clear, we are not for maintenance. We really like it as a topic to be investigated and to learn from maintenance, but not as something that to push for or to say maintenance of anything is good. And so on this very ambiguity of maintenance, the ambiguity is both for the thing and for the people that take care of it. You can destroy the thing. You can Mona Lisa, not this one, but other painting have been destroyed. So you really miss the thing you try to
You try to care
inscribe.
for it so much that you destroy it. Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Because I'm thinking about in the book too, you talk about care as work, and that is a really
Yeah.
important point. That this is, and I guess we need to kind of draw some lines. Like we've been talking about care, but we haven't used that word exactly. So, but also, yeah, in the book, it's very obvious that this is work and it's not easy. And I think that's what I was trying to get at too with the attention thing and how it can be very hard to pay attention to everything that's happening in this way that has to be done if you are the maintenance worker or the person taking care of the Mona Lisa or with the car. It's so sensory that it actually takes a lot of energy too, in a way. So I'll let you both, whatever might come up there, but.
Yes, it took energy, and it's just to follow up on what I just to connect what with this, but to follow up on what the ambiguities. It's only it's harsh and it's harmful. You can not only destroy or miss the thing you try to maintain, but you can also hurt yourself with the tools, with the product, with everything. And so in some situation, maintenance is not that positive or beautiful.
Like working on the bridge in
Yeah,
the,
because
it's dangerous to be taking care of the bridge.
care is work on the expertise, knowledge, whatever things part, but this is work also on the way the bodies are really put at the test and modern test in some.
Yeah, that's an important aspect because every kind of maintenance is not work in a strict sense, but saying that maintenance and care is work is completely connected to feminist theories about care. And of course, why we call that the care of things, it's because we found very important and crucial resonances between what we were looking at and the theory and the feminist theories of care. And which is very interesting is that Fernando Dominguez Rubio, who is a friend and a colleague who worked on Mona Lisa around 2015, and Steve Jackson, who did this beautiful paper in 2014, Rethinking Repair, we were all together paying attention to some kind of maintenance, phones with or computers for Steve, Mona Lisa, and then contemporary art with Fernando, and our subway signs at first. And we all did this connection without knowing each other with the ethic of care, which is very interesting because, and then we very quickly became colleagues and friends because we wrote to each other. And the work of Lara Houston, for instance, also, or a lot of people actually. But we all have this vocabulary of care, and it's super important because there is tons of lines of thinking and reflection between care of people and care of things. It's not the same, obviously, but and one of the lines is fragility, of course. Taking fragility as a starting point. The theories, feminist theories, are more likely to they use the term vulnerability, which is not exactly the same, but it's quite of course close. But work is another aspect. The idea that it's work, so it's not as easy as it seems. It's costly, and sometimes it's even a matter of health for workers. And a way to put this is, and it's another way to say that for us it's important to make maintenance count, is at what cost a thing can remain the same. at what cost, economic cost, but also human cost. A bridge, for instance, or a nuclear plant, to say things that are less romantic than Mona Lisa, for instance. At what human cost this remains in place. And this is very important because, and this is the third aspect of the discussion with the theories of care, is that, and I'm missing the point, yes, these objects are generally presented or casted as autonomous, as something that lasts for themselves, and they are not, actually. They need people to take care of them. Our computers, our infrastructure, tons of things needs people, needs maintenance to remain the same or to stay in place, to stay functional. And this is very clear, for instance, in architecture. When you saw a picture and you look at architecture journals, you don't see anyone. Sometimes you see an inhabitant, sometimes you see a user, but you never see a maintainer. And if no house, no building, nothing can last without some kind of maintenance. So this idea of this need work, this is really closely connected to the theories of care, saying that no people is autonomous. We all need some people to take care of us at some point, someday. And so we are all interconnected. And so this is also this struggle against the myth of autonomy, autonomous people and autonomous thing. And this is an important, really important aspect, which comes with the idea that people can get hurt doing maintenance, of course, and they can die doing maintenance, and it's very, in some situations, it's very problematic. But it's also come with this idea, okay, so these things that seem to be only material, that seems to be only technological, actually take people, maintainers, who sometimes are getting hurt or getting sick doing this maintenance. We should put them in the same picture, that the picture that describe or that sell this beautiful infrastructure, for instance.
Yeah, it reminds me of the ecology of fragilities. Ecology of fragilities is something that comes up in the book. Do you each have about 10 more minutes, or do we need to wrap it up real quick?
Yeah, it's okay.
Okay. Yeah, this reminds me of the ecology of fragilities, but also that it could sound like that we're trying to say that maintenance is better than development or innovation or something. And I know that's not what's being said here. So also the deeply disquieting aspect of it, I think, relates to what both of you were just saying, that it can be harmful, but it's also uncomfortable. Or I want to get into that a little bit about how you see, like maybe even how this has changed your perspective of everyday life or something, or what is this doing when we start to think about care of things? It is different from cares of people, but as you express in the book, these are changing the way our capacity almost for care is changing here in a way that reflects in all aspects of societies. How can we talk about that part of the book a little bit?
I was thinking it was a question about our own experience, but actually it became in the same sentence the whole globe.
Yeah, you can take it with your own experience if you want.
It's not that easy to actually.
You don't have to solve the global perspective. But...
Okay, I can try only on my own experience. Actually, I was raised, let's say, in a middle range class, but my grandparents really care about things and to last. To everything we had was really important for them to last. You know, when you are a small kid and you're always on your knees and never on your feet or everything like this, and they go up, you know, think of your parents. So just to mention, and so at that, let's say that for a long time it was okay. This is a generational thing. We don't care of it that much now, and all those investigations we did with Jérome really make me think differently, of course, from their worried, and of course they are no more there now, and in my own experience it became very important, not only to make them important and actualize in some sense what they taught me when I was young, it's really connected also to climate change and everything today. But so it's really connected and rearticulate things I learned when I was a small kid with my bike and everything, and try to have it to last. But at some point to replace every part because innovation. Because just to explain, I did for a long time I did freestyle BMX, and in that sport the parts are breaking, but at some point I used to change a lot, not because they break, but because I want some new ones. And so all the thing, all the thing we did with Jérome more than 15 years on maintenance really made me think, switch it, and really think differently, and at home and with my boys. I try
Yeah.
to explain them very differently because, of course, we are old daddy that is very boring, but we try to have something more political in a very feminist sense, political in the kitchen, political in the room, not political at the ground level, so to speak.
Yeah. I in a way you sort of nested all those different worlds. And Jérome, I want to hear your experience, but I just want to say, I want to ask, did it deepen? I'm thinking about my grandparents, and they had a farm, and you had to take care of everything, and there was a noticing and a kind of sensual connection to everything in similar ways to what we're talking about here. And not to romanticize that, but to have it sort of taken for granted, and then to grow up in, a pretty wealthy kind of family where you could just get new stuff when it broke. And that was kind of more my childhood after that, those early years. I guess what I'm trying to get at and ask you about is, for me, it was about realizing that when you care for things and when you can notice them and engage with them, they mean more, and the experience becomes richer and deeper. It can also become more overwhelming and more disquieting in the way we've talked about, but there's something in there that feels important. Did you realize that too in this experience with Jérome, and also just even in the way you started looking at the signs differently, or this whole project that has now become a book? Has it deepened something? I mean, would you say it's added kind of or expanded your own perception or way of noticing in any way?
Yeah, maybe just one sentence and Jérome gonna go. It's really connected to what Jérome just said before about interdependencies. Now, every time I'm looking, touching, whatever, a thing, it's not only a thing. It's always a lot of connected people, rules, ideas, values. It's really a chain of interaction between very different things. Even if I cannot acknowledge and identify all the components of the network, let, let, to say differently, this is really a flow. This is no more stable and autonomous things.
That makes a lot of sense, especially with what Jérome said, realizing the ecology of it. But okay, Jérome, so what about you and your personal world?
Yeah, my personal model is also, I think, also connected to the more general aspect of your question, is that I realized, I knew that, but I really realized how much in 50 years and even less, a whole kind of model of consumption had been installed by a certain kind of capitalism, which hyper-consumption basically, which has replaced everything that is break, and that's the carelessness, the idea of, at first we were obsessed that maintainers were experts in paying attention to things, to fragility. And then what I really understood eventually was that we were all experts of that a few years ago, a few decades ago. It was just the way things were supposed to be. Of course, because things are expensive, and maybe for affective reasons, but also for very mundane economic reasons, you would make them last. It's completely obvious, and it was completely obvious in very, very numerous situations and a lot of situations. And then how come, so I reversed the aspect, how come we could not pay attention to these fragilities? How come we didn't care? We, and the we is very situated, or how come I didn't care, for instance, for some things? And I discovered that I was taught not to care. And I remember a podcast we did a few years ago, a French one, and the podcaster, the woman who were interviewing us, just called her dad. And her dad said, and he said, you knew how to take care of things, but you didn't taught me. How come I don't know how to do that? And he answered to her, yes, because we don't you to bother with that. We want you to enjoy life, which means that comfort and modern comfort was designed with carelessness, were designed with the idea of you don't have to pay attention to things and their transformation. But there is another important aspect, and it's important that even in your question you connect the two. It's sometimes overwhelming. So there is a risk of ableism in this situation of we should all pay attention to everything every time. Of course not. Of course not. Of course, people cannot bear this idea, and they cannot stand to pay attention to everything or to worry for everything. And this is the question for Mustang owners, for instance, but for everything. Of course, when I take my bicycle and I go in the street in Paris, in Boulevard Saint-Michel, I have to pay attention to the fragility of the road, but not too much, and not some things are supposed to last. And some people are specialized in taking care of them, and it's a good thing too, the distribution of this work. So the point is more paying attention to the ecologies and the interdependencies, and this is the last point you mentioned with David, is that the point. The point is less paying attention to every kind of fragility of things, but of people who could be involved in the becoming of the things with you. So it's also a matter of repopulating the picture. It's not only a relationship between you and the thing, it's also taking this interdependency into consideration. And then maybe asking, is it worth it or not, or is it? But that's maybe I think the thing that really struck me eventually was this idea of carelessness and the configuration of carelessness as comfort, which is quite troubling and disturbing, at least.
Yeah, and there would be a whole other podcast there about, how that relates to technology and kind of our mindset today. But I think it's very rich to think about the care of things right now in that context, in the way that you're presenting. We talk a lot about beyond dichotomy or holding paradox here, and that doesn't mean, choosing one or the other of these is somehow better, but just that realization that people are maintaining, and it's a disquieting, difficult, and enriching sensual process. Just that kind of a noticing is almost like a meta layer to some of what you're discussing, in these situations, that gives something, I think, about a way of being in the world right now and thinking of it through this lens more as an ecology. But to kind of end, I wonder about, well, I was thinking about when you both go to the metro now, if it's different, if you're in that sense that you're holding things a little bit differently, not every day maybe, that you're aware of all these people around you as you go through the city on your bike or through the metro or whatever, what is this brought to that relationship, with the students? I'm just bringing up a few things. You can go wherever you want to go with it.
Well, of course, once you have this in mind, you cannot navigate the world exactly the same, because you pay attention to fragility of things and to people who take care of them. And actually, the very modest but also very ambitious aim of the book is for each reader to end it, close it, and don't look exactly to the world in the same way. And this is, in a Deleuzian way, it is a matter of percept, and the book is something like a percept more than a conceptual book, And this work, and it's quite immodest, but a lot of people are saying, "Oh wow, we don't go to the subway and we don't see the same thing. We don't live exactly the same thing." So this is very simple, and this is our political contribution which is very mundane one, but perceptual one. This is very important to us. And of course, so it's something personal, but it's also something we want to do with maintenance. And this idea of paying attention to the attention of others, the maintainers who take care. And regarding teaching, of course, this is something that are important because I teach, and David too, but a bit less because he's more more a researcher. Something that is a specialty in France. You can be only researcher, but you teach a little bit. But I teach to engineers and to and to very elite engineers. It's like it's not the Ivy League, but it's something like the Grande École in French. There will be very important people as soon as they leave the school, and trying to debunk some things, some aspects of, especially the idea of autonomy in technology, autonomous technology, and saying no, there is no autonomy, there is never, and each time you say that a technology is autonomous, you are doing a kind of coup de force, and you say, yeah, you are leaving a lot of people aside, and this is problematic because it's also a matter of value. If you put them aside, you say that this is the thing only who is valuable and not people. Of course, for AI today, all the work of annotators and people who are trying to make this thing work as if they were autonomous are crucial, for instance. So this is an aspect of how this kind of research can enrich the teaching.
Wonderful. That could almost be a whole other book about the autonomy.
Yeah.
I mean, that's such an important point. I'm glad you put it in there at the end, but I also just want to highlight it a bit because that opens up a whole other world right now in terms of technology. Okay, but what's coming up for you?
Yeah, clearly I'm not a teacher, but I can talk about the professional setting and not the teaching, but the students that are doing PhD with me. And that's really changed the way I envision their project and the way I manage to really to take care of what they want to do. And what they want to do not only with this kind of topic, but they want to do in their life. And how they project themselves in the academic world or not. This is not a problem to me, but I really take more time to really, let's say, go deeper into it, and and not just trying to infuse or explain how to do a good PhD. Yeah, of course, I'm still on this, but this is really a tiny part now. I try to really understand who they are, what they try to do with this topic, how the topic, the object, the scientific object relate to their own experience, and take really care of it and try to manage to drive all this close to having a good PhD. But this is not, it really changed the way and the time I take. I take very differently the time with those people. So this is not teaching, this is really to accompany someone with his her goal. And it takes a lot, but at some point it's no more at some point, not on every for every PhD student, but at some point it relates to two person going in a not to be a rock no, on the road, but to have a few steps on the same road for a time. And for some, they are no more PhD student because they defend the PhD, but we are close friends at some point because of this new time I try to investigate.
Wow, that's actually really moving because I think that in a way is what the book, kind of what you were saying, Jérome, it gives people something that's deep that it's hard for us to put into words. But I can just say, having talked to a lot of like really successful, famous people, whatever, that almost all of them end up talking about a supervisor or a teacher or a PhD or somebody who did kind of what you just expressed, that, you know, changed their trajectory in a way. And it relates to a lot of the things we've been talking about what you don't really notice or see in the everyday and all of that. But also I think that it gets at something like meaning and care in a way that makes it worth all of this that we're going through and doing. So on that note, I always ask if anyone has anything they wanted to say about love, because we didn't bring that word up. I have to at least say it. We've been talking about it, but I don't know if you think it relates. If not, you don't have to answer, but I want to at least ask if you have any relation to that word that comes up before we go. But I also want to say thank you for the book and for taking that moment and meeting with the maintenance workers and following that energy, because I think it's doing something important right now. But that's it. So anything you want to say to close, or anything we didn't talk about you want to be sure you say, then this is your time, and thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having us. No, love is quite important actually, and Steve Jackson has a few words on this idea of if you could love our artifacts and the things we are living with, maybe a lot of things would change in the world. So it's a bit romantic, but I think it's important. And for instance, we didn't mention that other kind of very special maintenance we followed is graffiti removers in the street of Paris. And there is no doubt that they really love Paris, and they even love graffiti actually, but they love Paris, and the way they take care of the stones, the facades, and the way they try to remove the graffiti is something like an act of love, which is important to understand if we want not to be too much critical about the big picture of graffiti removing, of course, which can be problematic in a political way, but discovering that the guys that are on the streets and that remove graffiti actually do love Paris and try to do their best to take care of the city in a very material way is fantastic. It's really super interesting.
It adds something to being a part of the city too, when you know that feeling is part of how you're experiencing it every day. It reminds me of something someone just said about love is sometimes what's holding you that you don't even feel. Like when you can't feel it, it's still holding you. And it's interesting to think of the city like that in terms of those people caring for it from that spirit. But and Davi?
Maybe just to say that so graffiti remover love Paris in a very different way, but in a, so to speak, in a as much emotional sense that writers themselves love Paris. And I don't know, I'm a bit shy about emotional and love, and I'm not sure how to articulate it, and maybe I can have a very short sentence, but I really love this interview, and I really love the way you put our ideas into question and really pick very differently, because of course this is not the first interview, not about the English version, but about the book, and I really love the way you articulate the topic.
Thank you. That actually brings us back to that idea of writing that I brought up at the beginning too, and because it's such a big part of that city too. And I do think all these are connected, you know? The writing of the book that you did, the writing of the city, the reading, the way I read it, maybe that's its own kind of ecology that we can't fully see, but maybe the listeners can grasp it. So thank you. This book did something for me, and I'm already sharing it with lots of people, and we hardly got into it, so for everyone listening, pick it up in French or English, or is it in other languages too yet?
No, not yet.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you both so much. I hope you have a beautiful afternoon there, and stay warm.
Thanks so much. Yes.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.